Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and today I'm going to talk about astrological schools and lineages. They're very useful to understand. We don't want to have them turned into straitjackets, though. So, in a sense, we're talking about horizontal versus vertical. But let's just sort of dive in. First of all, School of Astrology. Really what I'm talking about here is a school of thought. I'm not talking about some sort of formal organization or university of astrology. I'm talking about a school of thought. And labels are useful when the label corresponds to the thing it refers to, and it's not just sort of undifferentiated chaos. And I'm a cowboy. Okay, fine, you're a cowboy. Or I'm a traditional astrologer. I see that a lot. And it's like of people that are otherwise completely modern, but they like the labeling of traditional. It's like, that's fine, but it does get kind of confusing. So the next kind of confusing thing for people is this idea of schools of astrology. Really, I think the main idea is there's just undifferentiated astrology. It's basically all the same thing. If you ask somebody what type of astrology they practice and they say astrology, well, basically what that means is modern, natal, psychological astrology. That's as far as the people that are practicing it and what's being done for the most part, it's very heavily modern psychological natal astrology. Kind of reminds me of the movie The Blues Brothers. Of course, this shows my age. There's a scene where they go into this roadside bar and they ask the bartender, said, "What kind of music do you have here?" And the bartender answers, "We have both kinds, country and western." And there's just really a lack of understanding that that there's a difference between the type of astrology that we're doing, which is modern, and then what people might be doing in different places or different periods of time. So if we look at, as I said, schools, and these are just schools of thought, common approaches, and common philosophy. Again, the most predominant is going to be, in terms of numbers and influence, is going to be modern astrology. And the key, I think, here is the philosophy is essentially unconscious, or maybe even conscious, atheistic materialism. In other words, the causality of astrology is a scientific causality. I mean, many people believe that. So in other words, it's magnetism or electrical fields or quantum entanglement or something like that, or it's a black box. It's like it works, but I don't know how it works. I see that a lot. So really, if we're going to push beyond scientific causality, people say, okay, yeah, it's not magnetism. They're still going to be conceiving it in some terms of beams or energy or rays or something like that. So it's very, very strongly influenced by atheistic materialism. But for the most part, people aren't aware of that. They either don't think about the causality or they automatically assume, like I said, it's some scientific causality, because what else could it be? I mean, that's all there is. Modern astrology is also very heavily focused on natal charts, to the point that people are not even aware. I mean, horror astrology that looks at charts of questions is often a surprise to people. I mean, typically when I do a horary question for people will give me their natal chart as well, even though it's not used in a horary reading. I mean, this is not their fault. It's just that what they're exposed to is just so heavily natal that it's hard to understand that there's other things outside of it. Modern astrology is also very, very psychological. And so, again, the planets are taken as being internal psychological forces. The way things work is through psychology. That's the predominant focus for it. And again, very useful. I mean, I do a lot of psychological natal astrology. I got that from modern astrology. I've integrated it into my traditional practice. And I think it's, as far as I'm concerned, a really great and useful part of my astrological practice. And one of the great things about modern astrology, it's also very positive. I mean, the focus, again, it comes from more of a counseling focus, psychological focus, so it's much more positive. And it's, for the most part, not predictive. I mean, there are people that are trying to do predictions, but the whole focus of it is upbeat, positive, in terms of allowing you to be able to choose things that you go your way. It's not fate-based. That really upsets people. But it's providing ways to do what you want, be the kind of person you want to be, and to support you and give you positive, upbeat, and reassuring, understanding of things. In terms of technique, it's extremely eclectic. Modern astrology, the view is that, and if they don't typically think about it, but this is the approach that's followed. The unconscious assumption is that all astrological techniques are equally usable and work by themselves. So you can sort of go into any other type of astrology, take one technique off, and then you can stick it into your own practice, and it works perfectly well. And so you can sort of assemble your own, like it's like a tinker toy approach. You can assemble your own method by combining techniques. But because the underlying approach is the same and the underlying assumptions are the same, a lot of these, what people think are unique approaches are actually just variations on these same themes. And we'll see that it's true of other schools as well, is that in fact, people are not unique. People are following the methodology in the school and expressing that. It's just the question is whether they're aware of it or not aware of it. So another very important school is Hellenistic astrology. Hellenistic astrology originated in Babylonian Chaldea. This is the astrology of the Greeks and Romans. This is predictive, very fate-based. We do have somewhat of a mix of spiritual material. I mean material in the sense of elemental causality. Ptolemy was, hot and dry, earth, air, earth, fire, and water. You saw that as in heat and cold as being a key element of the causality. But ultimately, spiritual causality was the ultimate basis of things. That was more than matter and energy. There was also spiritual, and that was primary. Hellenistic astrology includes natal astrology, but also horary, electional, and mundane astrology. Mundane is looking at weather or countries or long periods of history. Hellenistic astrology is a specific set of techniques and assumptions and everything that all work together. And so they don't really have a tinker toy approach. They have a lot of techniques that sort of develop together. It's essentially like a language. And so they're not taking, nouns from German and adverbs from Spanish and adjectives from French and sticking them together. They're saying, essentially speaking language. And that is one way to think about the schools, as sort of as a language. Hellenistic astrology has really experienced a resurgence, an important school and something that's having a lot of impact. And it certainly provides, again, many modern astrologers will study Hellenistic techniques and then use it in their own practice. So the school that I am most strongly associated with is medieval Renaissance European astrology. And obviously I'm biased in favor of it, but like I said, I'm biased in favor of it, that I like chocolate over vanilla. It doesn't mean it's the best for everybody, it just means that's the one that I was drawn and resonates with me. Medieval Renaissance originated in the advanced Islamic civilization of the Middle East in the 8th and 10th centuries. Was this really brilliant synthesis of Hellenistic and Persian astrology with some Vedic mixed in. Very predictive, fate-based, the same mix of spiritual and material causality, but again, ultimate basis is spiritual. Again, natal, horary, electional, and mundane techniques, traditional astrological magic, and once again, a specific set of techniques that work together. It was revived originally as the Berkeley Horary lineage, and we'll talk about these lineages later. There's also the Zolar natal and the Warnock astrological magic lineages that are part of the medieval Renaissance school. Alternatively, people will talk about its symbolic synchronicity. So then another very important school of astrology is Vedic astrology. Again, this is the traditional astrology of India. It's integrated into their traditional ritual and spirituality. Once again, predictive, fate-based, ultimate basis is spiritual. Once again, natal, horary, electional, and mundane techniques, and once again, a specific set of techniques that work together. So these are essentially, when we're looking at schools, like I said, you could think of them as different languages. And that's sort of my approach. Now that's antithetical to the modern approach, because the modern approach is that everything is separate, everything can be combined. But as I see the schools, there are essentially different ways of using astrology, different parts of astrology that have techniques that work together and have been developed together, and that really, I think if you're going to take them all apart, then you're a modern astrologer. So that would be my approach to it. So again, there's other schools, Chinese, Tibetan, things like that. I'm not familiar with those schools. But I think that those traditional schools are going to follow along and be similar to the traditional European or the Vedic astrology in many, many ways. Modern is really the outlier in terms of being an unconscious atheistic materialism as its basis for causality, and being so eclectic in combining all these different techniques without having a set of techniques that it uses, predominantly from its own development. So schools, these are sort of the major, organization. I mean, pretty much everybody falls into a particular school. And if you don't know what school you're in, you're modern astrology for the most part. And so this is really intended as a means of understanding. It's sort of like a natural philosophy. It's taxonomy. We're going out and we're looking at these various animals, and we're classifying, looking at the behavior and things like that. And that's again what I would say about the astrological schools and lineages. This is like they exist. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the psychological natal astrology. I find it very effective. But I do think that the schools need to be taken on their own terms and understood on their own terms. And I think it's very useful to actually practice in a school and constantly understand what you're doing. And so then what you can do is look at what's available, find the one that resonates for you. It is good to know and be conscious of what we're doing and to be conscious of the influence of the schools. So I hope you find that useful and interesting. And I look forward to doing more videos in this area, and then again, passing out my school and lineage.